Morning, chickens. I just wanted to go through part 4 with you. Perhaps it'll help you on your questions, or if you've already done your questions, just listen carefully, okay? Part 4 begins where an Englishman is sitting on a bench in a warehouse. He's leafing through his chemical journey, and he's telling himself what he thought he would that he thought he would never end up in a place like this. He believes in omens and he's working on finding the one true language of the universe. First, he studied Esperanto, then world religions, then alchemy, and he feels that although he's discovered important truths about alchemy, he's not yet an alchemist, and he hopes to find an alchemist to serve as his mentor. So, this introduction of the Englishman reveals his character and priorities. He seems to be on a similar quest to Santiago, or at least he's trying to learn about similar ideas like the universal language, but he's reading a chemical journal. And his intensive studies shows that he believes in learning, but primarily in book learning, which is not quite the same as Santiago, right? But he doesn't just observe the world around him, which is like a big difference that he and Santiago have. So the Englishman spent most of his family's fortune seeking the Philosopher's Stone, which is the masterwork of the alchemists. And through his research, he learned about a famous alchemist who discovered the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. And the alchemist lives in this desert in the Al Fayoum Oasis, and that's why he's gone on this pilgrimage. And so it's clear that Santiago's path will also cross Al Fayoum in the world of the alchemist because he's headed towards Egypt too. And the principles of alchemy are really important throughout the novel because, after all, the title is The Alchemist. As the Englishman is waiting for the caravan, the young Arab arrives, and the Arab boy asks the Englishman where he's headed. The Englishman doesn't want to talk, so the boy takes out a book and begins to read. The Englishman notices that the book is written in Spanish, and he's relieved because his Spanish is better than Arabic. And then Santiago is being seen through the eyes of someone else who has lived in Morocco long enough. In the sense that Santiago looks like an Arab boy, but he actually is from Spain, right? And like Santiago recognizes that the Englishman has an introverted and reserved nature, and he also takes out his book and kind of sees him as a kindred spirit. Um, okay, so then they also share Urim and Thummim in common, which bridges the gap between them. They both have the stones and they understand how to use them. And Santiago's initial desire to protect his stones shows that he has learned this lesson with the thief, and he's not inclined to show off his possessions. And then it's also suggested that the Englishman might have met Melchizedek as well. Okay, and then there's an important part where Santiago says the Englishman must not believe a king would talk to someone like him, a simple shepherd, but the Englishman said shepherds were the first to recognize a king when the rest of the world did not, so it's not surprising that any king would talk to shepherds. He tells Santiago the stories in the Bible and that the Bible is the same book that taught him about Urim and Thummim. And in the Bible, priests would carry the stones embedded on their golden breastplates. Santiago did come from a Christian society and he did once study to become a priest. And he doesn't really seem to make the connection with the story of Jesus' birth with being a shepherd. And then the Englishman tells Santiago that there's the universal language, and the universal language is understood by everyone, and Santiago has witnessed this potential, so they're both on a similar quest. The Englishman also speaks of omens and how omens also align with the teachings of alchemy. And then the leader of the caravan comes, and it's important because there's 200 people and 400 animals, and the leader of the caravan says there's a lot of different types of people and they believe in a lot of different forms of gods. So it's emphasizing the importance of religion in the novel, and which is often a divisive force in the world. You know, a lot of wars are caused around people's religious beliefs, but Coelho suggests that it can also serve to bring people together. It can unite them even in a a harsh environment like the desert. And then um, so Santiago and the Englishman, they both are on camels, and Santiago understands that the Englishman is feeling about being led on a path of connected events, and that they both understand what their personal legend is and how they're seeking it with conviction. And then Santiago observes that the desert and the caravan can serve the similar function as his sheep do. Like, he can just learn from observing his sheep, and he doesn't necessarily need to learn things from a book. The camel driver is really important to Santiago. So far we've met the old gypsy woman, who wasn't that important. Melchizedek, very important. The crystal merchant, right? The Englishman, and now the camel driver. So Santiago also has this epiphany that when he worked with sheep and with working with crystal, it reminds him that everyone should live in the moment, right? Entirely be imbued in the moment. Because if you think about your past or if you think about your future, you can get anxious either way. So, you know, he's trying to be open and content with the new course that his life is taking. We could try to follow this similarly, as we're still stuck at home and really don't know when we're going to be able to return to normalcy, whatever normalcy means at this point. And then, Santiago also still thinks about the merchant's daughter, and, you know, he's feeling that she's probably married someone else. And then the camel driver mentions that you can learn so much from the desert, and then that might also connect to the universal language of all things, like the interconnectedness of all things. I don't know if you guys have heard a call for, I don't know, to a universal language with each other. Have you come across any spiritual forces in your personal quest? Then the caravan has to go through all these obstacles, right? So, there's bumps in the road. It's kind of a metaphor for Santiago's journey. He's sidetracked or diverted, but he continues to move towards his goal. And I told you that you're probably going to come across some obstacles in your own personal quests. And the camel driver's path to his current profession was also part choice and part fate, right? Fate versus destiny. And he lost everything from his previous life with, that was beyond his control. And then because he had no control over this great loss, but he could choose what to make of his life after the loss, right? So it could be one thing to, I don't know, have done not your best work in Marquee Period 3, and then just say, oh, well, I didn't really, I barely passed quarter 3. Why should I even care about quarter 4? No, you make a choice to improve, work even harder, or maintain that great grade that you got, but make the choice, make it about choosing. Don't let yourself be a victim to circumstance, just because this happened. Oh, let's just blame it on, COVID-19. I mean, in some cases it can be very destructive, but, the choice is yours. Make the right choice that's going to serve you and your success. So then, right, so the camel driver teaches Santiago that from his experience of loss, it's pointless to fear loss because there's no real loss because everything has already been written. So any loss is just another step on his journey that's written by God who made the world. So some people believe that, there's a God that's already carved out a path for you, and that's the one that you're going to follow, and that God is watching out for you. For me, with my mom, who was just taken away from me very early, I like to think that there is a higher being that just had another idea for her. Like, he didn't let her suffer, and she was very lucky. A lot of people who are sick are suffering right now. So I like to think that there was a greater purpose for her, which is why she's no longer with, me currently. That gives me solace to think that way. I mean, everyone has their own beliefs, but I think that's in alignment with what the camel driver is saying, like the phrase, everything happens for a reason. So the caravan encounters another group traveling in the desert, and the men are appearing and sharing information about thieves and warring tribes. So then there's fear in the air, because we need another like conflict in the story. So there's desert war gossip, foreshadowing that the actual wars will occur, and the fear of attack connects the people even more. Because there's a universal language there. Like, they don't communicate it, but they sense it from each other. And then, and then the camel driver uses the word maktub. And then Santiago tells the Englishman that he should pay more attention to the caravan. But then the Englishman tells Santiago that he should be reading more. So the camel driver has the same perspective on these oncoming tribal wars that he did on the loss of his previous life, because he believes whatever happens was meant to be. And also, in the meantime, Santiago and the Englishman can learn from each other's learning styles, like balancing reading with observation. So that's what we try to do in our classroom too. Like, you guys read, but you also like discuss. You have discussions, you have debates. You learn from other like modes and methods. It's not just reading from the textbook, right? So the Englishman and Santiago are maintaining their friendship, although they have different understandings about ways to learn. And then the Englishman is explaining ideas of alchemy to Santiago, but Santiago's already encountered the concepts in his quest. So although he sees that the soul of the world connects him to everything, he feels like the terminology that the Englishman is trying to teach him aren't unfamiliar to him. But the Englishman interprets that as Santiago just being like kind of ignorant and not really taking it in. And then Santiago sees the desert and the caravan as two entities communicating and speaking the same language and able to work together. But the Englishman hasn't been paying attention to the desert. But then he realizes Santiago is right, and he's not using his understanding of alchemy to its fullest potential, because he's only going one-sided. But then Santiago also wants to read more about alchemy. So then there's all these different Englishman's books. There's the Emerald Tablet, which is a symbol in the novel. It symbolizes the value of simplicity, and all the secrets of alchemy were simple enough to be contained on a single tablet. But men like the Englishman prize complexity. They don't see the value of that. But Santiago understands. He questions the need for so much, other reading about the topic. Because, if you remember, Santiago's from kind of a more modest background. He's been a shepherd. He's lived with very little. Whereas the Englishman was born into privilege, and he's made himself learn all these things, and bought things with his riches, and so he can't really see sometimes less is more, right? So then Santiago learns from the Englishman that the processes of alchemy allow a person to change himself. or herself, and takes time and many steps. So that's kind of what we're doing with our personal quest. It's almost like our own alchemy. Your alchemy is your formula for how you're going to reach your end goal. And every day you're taking the steps. Like I notice some of you are working out, some of you are praying, I'm meditating, some of you are practicing healthy behavior, you know. Some of you are like applying to like looking researching colleges or researching professions and what colleges align with the profession. Like you're all taking little steps to, you know, be the best version of yourself and to embark on a spiritual sort of journey. We also learn about the master work of the alchemist is divided into the elixir of life and the creation of the philosopher's stone. The elixir of life makes the alchemist, it prevents him from becoming old, and then the philosopher's stone allows the alchemist to turn other metals into gold. And then, like, the Englishman claims that in the process of purifying metals, the alchemists also purify themselves. It's kind of cool. Wow, I wish I had the power to purify myself. And then, like, Santiago realizes that the crystal merchant had a similar understanding of his work to the Englishman's work because, you know, it's a good thing to clean crystal in order to free yourself from negative thoughts. Like if you give yourself an action that's like productive or that you can kind of lose yourself in, it will stop your negative thinking patterns. I think some of you are already doing that in your personal quest. So in a way, Santiago is learning that you can like apply the rules of alchemy in your everyday life. And then so the Englishman sees complexity as the gatekeeper to the secrets of alchemy, and that the responsibility of studying weeds out those who are too irresponsible or somehow unworthy of alchemical knowledge. But and also, like, the Englishman has a lot of flaws. Like Santiago learns from other people's flaws too. So the Englishman's inability to learn from the caravan reveals his fixation on the idea that of knowledge as something complex and exclusive rather than intuitive and universal. So you've heard the difference between like book smart and street smart, right? Well, that's kind of like what's going on here. Like the Englishman thinks that everything can be taught from like literature and studying, whereas Santiago knows that he's learning just as much from just living it, being on the road, literally, to the desert. So again, Santiago's learned more about simplicity and interconnectedness, and the alchemist has learned the opposite from studying the exact texts. But the Englishman doesn't value Santiago's interpretation of alchemy because it's different from his own, and he doesn't think that Santiago has gone through enough studying to be worthy of the teachings. But again, like Santiago, even though he's younger, he just feels like there's different ways of learning, and he respects the Englishman's approach. And then the camel driver again offers Santiago more wisdom about the threat of war, because he says like each thing can be done in its own time. So the camel driver achieves peace of mind by living in the moment, like Santiago's sheep, and only focusing on the present. This concept also brings other world religions into the novel, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, and the practice of meditation based on the idea of living in the moment and detaching from anxiety or fear connected to the past and future. It's kind of what I've been saying. So I talked to my mentor, Mrs. Smith. Some of you may know her this morning, and I had a little bit of anxiety about what's to happen. I mean, we know that we don't have our final exams, but you know, are we going back to school? When's the last day of school? Like, you know, do I need to do this with them? Like, what if, you know, some of them need this assistance, or, you know, like just trying to navigate through all my questions. And at a certain point, Mrs. Smith was like, look, we're all in the dark about this. And she was kind of like the camel driver. She was like, you just have to like, it's beyond our control. Each thing will come in its due time, so just accept and be open, right? What I was saying about meditation, accept and be open. And then, yeah. Okay, and then we're gonna get to part 5 now, okay? So please, I really hope you watch this video to help you understand part 4, and I'm about to read part 5 now for you guys.